once and be recognized, everyone, and welcome back to the Sitrep podcast, your forward operations space for all things military and historical wargaming. I am your host, Risky Jim, and today we're back to finish up our look at the Battle of 73 Easting, fought between the U.S. Army and the Iraqi Republican Guard during the Gulf War of 1991. The system we're using is an upscaled modification of 7 Days to the River Rhine by Great Escape Games. I say modified because we're using a lot of house rules. For instance, we're activating all of the Iraqis strictly by platoon. There's just too many of them otherwise. We're also using house rules to handle certain things normally handled by the tactical advantage cards, things like fixed-wing airstrikes and off-board artillery support. So we went over all of the background and context for the Battle of 73 Easting, along with the Gulf War in general, all last week. There's a link to part 1 in the description of this video if you're interested in that material. Real quick, let's just say that as the coalition ground units, specifically 7th Corps, made its big left hook toward the Kuwaiti border, they ran into some of the Iraqi operational reserve, namely the Republican Guard. The lead American unit to make contact was the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment, specifically Eagle Troop of 2nd Squadron. The unit they ran into was the al-Talwalkana, or In God We Trust division of the Republican Guard. This kicked off an absolutely furious engagement of frankly shocking violence, a complete massacre that was as brutal as it was one-sided. More Iraqis of 12th Armored Division would be engaged later, not that that would help very much. Our game is trying to approximate at least some of this engagement, although I only have one platoon of Abrams main battle tanks and one platoon of Bradley armored cavalry vehicles, so about half of what Eagle Troop actually had on that day. And our table is also pretty compressed and much busier than the actual battlefield, which historically speaking was much more of an open desert plain. So barren was this battlefield, in fact, that historians had no towns or rivers or hills, anything like that, to name the battle after, so it would go down in history named simply for its grid reference on coalition maps, 73 Easting. So far, our game has turned out pretty much like the real event. Some American units took the first round of Iraqi fire, which, let's be real, didn't really do very much, and then the Americans engaged in general and proceeded to vivisect the Iraqi forces facing them. We've had at least 10 Iraqi tanks blown all over the battlefield so far, without a single American vehicle destroyed in return. We've had 2 Abrams take some very minor damage, and that one Apache gunship has been forced to return to base with a little bit of smoke coming out of her tail rotor, but that's about it. The Iraqi side of the table, meanwhile, is absolutely soaked in blood and smothered in smoke, and the Americans are just getting started. So the question inevitably follows, why even bother playing in a wargame that's this absurdly one-sided? Well, remember, we always measure our victory conditions based on historical results. So in order to win this game, the American player is going to have to match or even exceed the results achieved by Eagle Troop. And let's get real, that's a pretty high friggin' bar to hurdle. The Iraqis, conversely, have to do just better than they did historically. Well, historically, they achieved almost nothing. So in gaming language, the Iraqis are going to have to get lucky just once. Is that what we're going to see here today? Are the Americans going to get cocky and expose one of their flanks? Or are the Iraqis going to score that one miracle shot that just might brew up one of these Abrams? Let's head over to the footage and see how our recreation of the Battle of 73 Easting finishes up. Clearly the game is in progress. We're partway through turn 2, and we're looking at the full American Abrams platoon, which is cresting the last little bit of high ground here, ready to engage the Iraqis. The Iraqis are going to try to react. They have a total of 7 tanks in 3 different units. Remembering, we're activating all Iraqi tanks by platoon. So the first group of Iraqi tanks just failed with that one. I should say they needed 3 up here. Okay, those T-55s have also failed. And their last chance is going to be that platoon of 3 T-72s on the other flank. Boom! Not only have they reacted with a 6, but with a 6 they have stolen initiative from the Americans. So those 3 T-72s will fire before the Americans get a chance. Normally the Iraqis need a 6 to hit, but here they're going to need a 7 because the Americans are moving. Looks like they've scored a hit though, but now when it comes to penetrating the armor, yeah, the Iraqis don't even come close. Long story short, take your first shot. When it comes to getting through the frontal Chalbam armor of these Abrams, the Iraqis are going to need to roll 10s on their penetration. But they have scored a hit, and now we're going to finish up the rest of the American turn. And yeah, we got to be careful here because the Americans' target to hit does get affected by previous activations taken this turn and previously assessed morale tokens. But with that kind of a roll, those first 2 Abrams have clearly hit. We go to these next 2 Abrams here. We'll go to this third one here in the center because this is going to be his second activation, and he's taken... Oh, you know what? With the 1, though, he's missed no matter what. Okay, let's go to this last Abrams here. Notice he's got 2 blue checks. This is his second activation, so we have to add 1 to his target. Plus, he just took a hit from that Iraqi reaction fire, don't forget. But with another 1, he's going to miss as well. With 2 hits scored, the Americans are now going to roll for penetration. You can see where their firepower there is an 11, and the enemy armor is 15. So you roll a d10, you add your firepower, and the total of those 2 has to beat the armor. So basically they need to beat a 4. And with a 7 and a 5, they have scored 2 penetrations. So now we see if the T-72s explode on a 4+. Doesn't really matter in this case, but if you have nearby friendly infantry, it can make a difference. So like we said before, when the Iraqis rolled that 6 on their reactions, that means that they stole initiative. It's now actually the Iraqis' turn. So it looks like that intact platoon of T-55s there and that sole surviving T-72 are going to move forward and engage those forward Abrams you see there on the high ground. They just have to be careful not to blunder into the sights of those Bradleys and their tow missiles. One thing to bear in mind, though, all these Iraqi tanks have already acted this turn. These 3 T-55s you see here, and also the surviving T-72. This is their second activation for this turn, hence you now see they have 2 red poker checks by them. This means that they have to actually roll to activate, but you have to basically beat the number of counters that you were carrying before you spent this new activation, so they basically both had to beat a 1. They both made it easily, so now they get to activate. This is just a mechanic to keep players from activating the same unit over and over and over again. It turns into a bit of a push your luck mechanic, but they've both activated now, and looks like they're going to go ahead and take their shots on the flank of those M1s. The thing is, I think one of these T-55s might have to move before he can take that shot. So he's now, hedged up a little bit there. In fact, let me go ahead and adjust that a little bit. Okay, that way he's not blocking his buddy's line of fire there. And let's see if the Iraqis get lucky with these flank shots. However, when it comes to calculating chances to hit or targets to hit, you also have to bear in mind previous activations. The more you activate the same tank over and over and over again, the tougher it gets for the crew to execute the orders. So he starts off on a 6+, he did not have to move, however this is his second activation, so that 6+ you see there becomes a 7+. Alright, T-72 has missed. We go to these 2 T-55s that didn't have to move. They only had to add 1 because, again, this is their second activation. So, looks like they have both scored flank hits on the Abrams. Okay, now this guy actually goes up even more because not only is his second activation, he also had to move. So that 6+ becomes an 8+. Let's see what he gets. Alright, 5, he missed. Alright, we just have to worry about these 2 here. They have scored flank hits on the Abrams. That's not good news. Okay, now to penetrate. The T-55 only penetrates on an 8. It's a 100mm rifle, but it's the side armor, and the side armor is a 17, so it's now actually possible. If you add a D10 to the T-55's firepower, you might beat a 17. So, here we go. And with a 9, that 3 is no problem, but that 9 is a problem. Yeah, because that 9 plus the T-55's firepower of 8, that equals exactly 17. That is going to leave that Abrams fully stacked on morale tokens there on that high ground. That is not good news. The Iraqis smell blood in the water because they know that if they hit that Abrams on the flank one more time, that is going to exceed the crew's morale rating and thus cause the crew to abandon the vehicle. So all those same tanks are going to reactivate for a third action. I've made the required D6 rolls off camera. Sorry for not catching that. Now we're rolling to hit. Now, the Iraqis' difficulty to hit, their targets to hit, have all ratcheted up because this is now their third shot of the turn. And with that 1 and 2, yeah, you're not hitting anything with that. The last T-55 rolls a 7, he misses. Now that last T-72 gets his chance. Let's see what he gets. Ping! Oh, no. Okay, that was a hit. Doesn't even have to penetrate the armor. That is going to exceed that crew's morale rating, and I don't know if you want to call it a mission kill or a mobility kill. That Abrams is disabled and considered combat ineffective for the rest of the game. Long story short, take your second shot. It's time for Mr. A-10 Warthog to swoop in and sort this situation out. Now, this will trigger 2 potential reactions from the Iraqis, from their air defense. They have 2 reaction tokens left in their army. The first will come from Mr. ZSU 57-2, you see there in those palm trees, and once again, our friendly neighborhood Manpads gunner. So, this is their second activation for the turn. They now need 4s to react instead of 3s. The ZSU fails with a 2, and then we head over to the Manpad gunner, and he is going to succeed with a 6. He would steal initiative, but they have no tokens left, so it doesn't matter. Normally, he needs a 9 up to hit a fixed-wing aircraft, make that a 10, because this is, again, his second action. He misses wildly with a 3, and that leaves the A-10 Warthog once again free and clear over the battlefield. He's going to go ahead and engage with Maverick anti-tank missiles that need a 3 to hit. I'm going to engage that ZSU 57-2 because I'm tired of taking fire from him. I easily hit with the 5, and now to penetrate, it's a 12 to penetrate. The armor on that Zoo is only a 12, so I basically have to beat a 0 on a D10. Hello. So, yeah, that target is hit and destroyed. It does not explode. That's what the 2 signifies. I'll go ahead and flame him out, and that's the end of him. Now that A-10 more or less has free reign over the battlefield for the rest of the game. In fact, let's go ahead and bring that A-10 back right now. I'll go ahead and spend a second activation token and bring him back for a second attack. Now, I do technically have to roll for that because he has already acted this turn, but I beat that roll easily with a 5. And yeah, that A-10 is now back for seconds. So, this time I'm going to set up a gunnery strafe run on this platoon of T-55s. Let's go ahead and put some gun smoke on that Avenger cannon because it looks cool as shit. I mean, why wouldn't you? But in all seriousness, let's go ahead and resolve this strafing attack. Now, these are house rules that we bring into 7 Days to the River Rhine on how we handle fixed-wing aircraft. We basically get a 12-inch strafe line that we can get. The cannon, it's an autocannon, obviously. It has a 6+ to hit. And actually make that a 7+, because to be fair, this is the A-10's second attack this turn. So like any other unit, it has to pay extra for that. Now, it's an autocannon, so it gets to roll twice per attack. So far, it's scoring hits on all of them. Now, if you score 2 hits, you don't get 2 hits. You just get 2 chances to make a hit. But it looks like all 3 of those T-55s have been hit. Now we're going to do the penetration. It penetrates on a 6, so we roll a d10, we add 6, and we're trying to beat the roof armor. More house rules here. Roof armor is whatever the published flank armor is, -2. So because my penetration is 6, I'm basically looking to beat a 4. So we have a kill, a miss, and a kill. So that guy has been hit and is now burning. That guy, his armor actually held, and he is also smoked. To round out the turn, I'm going to roll forward with these 2 Bradley Armored Cavalry vehicles. Now, they can't fire their toes in the same activation in which they move. You can never fire anti-tank guided missiles while moving, but they can fire their autocannon. Problem is, their autocannons only have a 4 penetration. You roll a d10 and add 4, which limits what they can actually destroy if they hit. Notice the armor on the T-55 is 15, so even if I roll a 10, I'll never get through the front armor. Now, I know we've seen Bradley shoot into frontal armor of T-90s in Ukraine in real life, but here in 7 Days, can't really do it. Unless, now bear with me here, the reason I'm firing with those 2 Bradleys and not those other 2 is because with these 2, with their position, I can technically call this a flank shot and score some 25mm hits on that T-72 that is carrying maximum morale tokens. So like we saw with that M1 earlier in the turn, I just have to hit him. And his flank armor is 13, so a 4 can technically penetrate a 13. In order to force a morale token, you have to score a hit with a weapon that could conceivably get through the armor. So you can't just spray a tank with machine gun fire and, hope for the best. So, long story short, take your third shot. He's going to go ahead and open up with his Bushmaster, try to score at least one hit on the flank of that T-72, and if he does, he will force the crew to abandon per the morale rules. Because, again, with a 4, he can technically penetrate. And he gets 2 chances to roll because he's an autocannon. That 9 is a hit. That's literally all he needs, just for fun. The other guy also shoots as well. Yeah, that T-72 is now actually 2 markers past his morale token maximum, so that crew is going to abandon, and that tank is considered destroyed. Moving into turn 3, the Americans are the attackers in this scenario, so they start each turn with initiative. Then Abrams is moving forward, and believe it or not, he's not engaging that T-72. Instead, he's going to go to work on those Type 59-2s you can probably barely see at the top of your screen. And the reason for that is I'm going to move forward with these other 2 Abrams later in the turn, and I don't want them catching more flanking fire. Now, that T-72 will react. You see the red activation token that I've got there to track that reaction. You see where he made his roll to react with the 5 in the dice tray. To hit, he misses wildly with a 1. And now the Abrams gets to complete his turn and engage the Type 59. He hits easily with a 9, and now to penetrate the Type 59's armor, easily with an 8. We roll to see if the Type 59 explodes. It does not, but that is the end of that unit. That Abrams is going to reactivate, so I do technically have to roll for that, but I make it easily with a 3. Alright, he's going to take a second shot and try to kill the second Type 59-2 that you see hanging out there on top of that styrofoam hill. So, the only difference now is that because it's my second shot of the turn, my target to actually hit is going to go up by 1. So instead of a 4, it's a 5, but man, he hits on a 10. His gunner is hungry. Penetrates on an 8. Come on. Yes, he does explode with a 6. Yeah, that Type 59 turret is God knows where it's landing. So that is going to be 2 Type 59s trashed by the single Abrams this turn. The third Type 59 was wrecked earlier by the A-10, so that's the end of that platoon. I just have to watch out for that 1 T-72 there, and a few survivors over here on this wing. That's pretty much it. Now I'm going to activate these other 2 Abrams, and they're going to spend 2 activations real quick to sort of double bound this longer distance to get to this next piece of high ground. Now I am going to have to make some rolls for that because, again, I am actually spending 2 activations here. Also, they're both carrying some damage markers, those white morale tokens. So let's make some die rolls and make sure we're doing this all legal. So for the first one, they have to roll to make sure that they can overcome that morale token. Makes it easily with a 5. The second Abrams also makes it with a 4. And now to make that second activation. So now I have to beat a 2. So the first Abrams makes it easily with a 6, but the second one fails with a 1. So I don't completely pull this off. That second Abrams does not actually get the second activation. He's actually going to be lurking back a little bit in that gully between those 2 patches of high ground. But that guy is on the high ground and can now engage. So he's going to open fire on Mr. T-72, scores an easy hit with a 9. Now to penetrate, a 7. Yeah, American dice are just suddenly on fire. We roll to see if that tank explodes. It does not, but it's definitely knocked out. Back to the Bradley Armored Cavalry vehicles. Now these tracks did not move this activation, so they're free to fire their tow missiles. They need a 3 up to hit. Make that a 4 because of the improved position that the T-72 is in. Either way, that's a hit. It penetrates on a 12. The T-72's armor is a 15, so he basically needs to beat a 3. But he gets exactly a 3, so I didn't actually beat it. That means that the T-72 is going to be maximum stacked on morale tokens. The other Bradley is going to fire at a T-55 that's diagonally across the table, scores an easy hit with a 9, and now to penetrate, he is also going to get a 3, but luckily the T-55's armor is worse than the T-72's and much less on the flank. So that T-55 you see there back by those palm trees, he is going to be destroyed. This T-72 is maximum stacked on morale tokens. So this Bradley is going to reactivate and again spray him with 25mm autocannon fire. Hopefully just get 1 hit on him and force him to bail. So I get 2 chances at a 4 up, make it a 5 up because he is in an improved position. That 10 does count as a hit, and that will now force that T-72 over his morale maximum. That's the end of that vehicle. just so I can say I used them, I brought my 2 Humvees on the table here. They do have 50 cals on the roof, and we do have house rules for handling 50 cals on very light vehicles. We basically consider them very light autocannons, and they're engaging some Iraqi infantry at the far side of the table. So they went after this Manpads team, which again, with our 1991 Iraqi ratings, which are reduced, they only have a morale of 2. Both Humvees scored a hit, that's going to be 1 morale token each, and then one of those succeeded in converting for extra damage. So that's a total of 3. That exceeds the 2 morale rating, and that's how you kill infantry in 7 days to the River Rhine. With this ZSU 57-2 down and that Manpads gunner down, there's now nothing left to oppose Mr. A-10 Warthog. The Americans are going to bring him in with their last activation for the turn. And, I mean, look at this dream target, 5 BMPs in a row, but the BMPs are going to react, because the Iraqis, for once, do still have some activation tokens. So you see that successful 4, that was a successful activation. Now, I can't shoot at the A-10 with the BMPs, they don't have any AA weapons, but you don't have to shoot with a reaction, you can also move. And what these BMPs are going to do is scatter, because there's an A-10 coming in. Scattering is the thing to do. Alright, so now that the A-10 no longer has its dream target of 5 BMPs in a perfect row, he's just going to go ahead and take his 12-inch strafe path and try and take out those 2. Scores easy hits on the first one, scores another good hit on the second one. Penetration is a 6 against the roof armor of a BMP. Again, it's going to be flank armor -2. It's only a 7, so I basically have to beat a 1. Again, it's 6 versus 7, and you add the result of a D10. Oh wow, a 10. That first BMP is just tin foil all over the battlefield. Forget about him. And the second one is a 5. Yeah, I easily defeat the armor there as well. That is going to be 2 BMPs smoked. We roll to see if they explode. And it looks like actually neither of them do. But those are 2 BMPs well and truly smoked. Over to the Iraqis, I'm going to try to reactivate these 3 surviving BMPs, so that's a second activation. That means I have to beat 1 from my previous activation. Alright, I actually failed. Put down another reaction token because I'm desperate. So now there's 2 previous activations. I have to beat a 2. This time I made it with a 5, so they have now successfully activated. Rapid move on a light AFV is 18 inches, so I'm going to go ahead and measure out the move here for my 3 BMPs. Placing the models now that I've pre-measured the distance. There's 1 BMP. There's the other one. The third one started off much further back, so he'll hang out in that rubble pile there. And they're going to start drawing a bead on those Bradleys that you see hull down way off in the distance. Okay, now the problem is I'm going to have to activate them yet again. So down goes a 4th activation. Let's see if I can go ahead and beat. I have to beat a 3 now on a D6. Okay, I did make it with a 5, so against all odds, boom, there's a 4th activation going down for those BMPs. So let's count this up. Number 1, they've moved, so that counts as 1. They've taken 3 prior activations before they can open fire, and lastly, those Bradleys have partial cover behind their little bridge there. So that's a total of +5 to the BMP's target. So they start off with a 6 up to hit, but again, we have to add 5. That technically gives them an 11 plus, but the game kind of caps out at 10. So yeah, I'm going to get 3 chances there to roll a 10. And holy crap, it looks like I did actually get one. Alright, so now let's see if we can penetrate. So the penetration on a 76mm is 7, the armor on the Bradley is 13, the difference is 6, that means I have to beat a 6 on a D10 to penetrate, and yeah, with a 7, the Iraqis have successfully penetrated and thus destroyed one of these Bradleys. Now, that's borderline spooky, almost creepy, because that's exactly what happened during the actual initial engagement at 73 Easting. Their only real combat loss was a Bradley ACV to the 76mm gun of a BMP. Starting off turn 4, we're going to begin with, believe it or not, our American ambulance vehicle, and his move is going to be to move forward his 18 inches. That gets him to within 12 inches of these Abrams, and try to remove some of these morale tokens first, before those Abrams activate, and then those Abrams have to pay all kinds of activation penalties and to hit penalties and so on. So again, these are house rules that we use for our ambulance vehicles. He has to roll a 3-up on a d6 to remove a morale token from any unit within 12 inches. He succeeds, so that Abram will not have to, no longer suffers from that morale token. Put down another activation token for the ambulance, so he has to roll for that to get a second activation in order to remove a second morale token from another M1. So we'll see if he can now remove that morale token. He needs again to beat a 3-up on a d6. Succeeds with a 6, so he would have removed all the activations. It's kind of like the battlefield morale check rule in standard 7 days to the River Rhine. But he only has one morale token on him anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Alright, so the point is both of those M1s are now free and clear of any morale tokens. They don't have to pay to activate, they don't have to roll to activate, I should say. And once they do start engaging, they won't have any penalties to hit. So yeah, they're going to go to work on some of these remaining BMPs. And again, from here, it's, I don't want to say it's mopping up, but it's almost mopping up. I'm pretty sure all tanks have now been destroyed on the table, and these Abrams are now just picking off these remaining BMPs. So you can see where that one has actually exploded there with the explosion roll of 5. That one's just destroyed. There's really just, one BMP left in that rubble pile. That's the only Iraqi AFV left on the table. We have a little command group there, but that's about it. Now we're activating some of our Bradleys to open fire on the very last BMP. 7, that's an easy hit with a tow missile, and the penetration is, kind of a joke here. Yeah, that's going to be the end of that last BMP. We're going to roll to see if he explodes. Yes, he definitely does explode. So we'll go ahead and flip him over. And that's the end of the last Iraqi armored fighting vehicle on the table, and more or less going to end the game. And that's more or less going to wrap up our creation of 73 Easting. Again, we see that little village or training ground to the southwest where the ZU-23-2 historically opened fire on some Bradleys to ignite the real-life Battle of 73 Easting. Other than that, it turned out more or less like the history, except for that Abrams that, again, it did not explode, didn't kill any of the crew members, it's not destroyed, but it's probably going to get towed back to the repair depot where they will more or less write it off. We did lose a Bradley to the 76mm gun of a BMP-1, so we kind of landed right on the history as far as that part goes. And the other aspect that turned out almost exactly like the real history is, surprise, surprise, the Iraqis are effectively tabled. They had a few infantry escape off the table, and they have that little command element you can't really see there on the extreme lower left of your table. But other than that, everything's on fire, everything's burning. Half the tanks are not only destroyed, but full out exploded. Yeah, it's the goal for more or less in a nutshell here at 73 Easting. So, thank you very much for joining us and, following us through this battle. This was a very asymmetric battle for 7 days to the River Rhine, but I had a lot of fun, and I hope you guys enjoyed our content. Thanks very much for checking us out. And there you have it, folks. With the Iraqis more or less completely tabled, 1 Bradley knocked out, and 1 Abrams being towed back to the recovery yard, this game comes out roughly approximate to the historical result. To be honest though, I didn't really point up this scenario. You'll notice I ran in solitaire. I wasn't sure how well the 7 days to the River Rhine system would handle a battle this asymmetrical. Turns out it did pretty well. But as far as historical accuracy goes, I didn't give the Americans their historical MLRS support. I didn't give the Iraqis their minefields. Then again, I didn't give the Iraqis any breakpoint. They pretty much fought until the very last man, which of course isn't realistic at all. So it's kind of tough to compare versus the historical results. With 2 AFVs out of action, this might come down to kind of close to a draw as far as game results go, but let's be real, the Americans have definitely won the battle. But these are the hurdles you face when you're trying to bring realistic modern engagements to your tabletop. So many engagements in the modern era are wildly unbalanced, and you have to factor that into your victory conditions. And that's where we're going to leave it for now, folks. Thanks very much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. Please remember to hit that notification bell. Also, please consider joining the Sitrep Podcast Discord. There's an auto-accept invitation link to our Discord in the description of this video. Join our community, see what everybody's doing, and best of all, show us what's happening on your hobby table. But for now, this is Risky Jim with the Sitrep podcast. We are rounds complete for another episode. And as always, Tango Mike for watching.